A jet is rolling toward you. The man standing in front of it is not touching it, not shouting at it, not holding a radio. He lifts both arms, folds them once above his head, and 20 tons of aircraft stops exactly where he wanted it to stop. He never said a word to the pilot. He never will. Watch that deck for another minute and you see it everywhere. Arms up, arms crossed, a fist turning in the air, two fingers pointed down at a wheel. From a distance, it looks like traffic direction performed by people who are unusually serious about it. Up close, it is closer to a language, with a vocabulary and a grammar and rules about who is allowed to speak. Because that is exactly what it is. Not improvisation, not a local habit picked up by a confident 22-year-old. A fixed set of signals, each carrying one meaning and only one, taught and tested before anybody is allowed within 100 feet of a running aircraft. Invent a gesture out there and it does not read as a mistake. It reads as nothing at all. Start with why speech was ruled out, because everything else follows from that. A flight deck at work runs past 140 decibels. That is not loud the way a concert is loud. It is loud in a way that makes shouting useless. A human voice tops out around 80, and 80 disappears into 140 before it has crossed 4 feet of open deck. Everyone up there is also sealed shut. Hearing protection is mandatory and doubled. Foam plugs under a padded cranial that covers the ears completely. Goggles cover the eyes. A float coat covers the chest. The wind across an open deck runs 30 knots before you add anything the aircraft are doing. The person standing beside you is, acoustically, in a different building. Radios do not rescue this, and it is worth being precise about why. They exist and they work. They are also busy. Those circuits belong to the tower, to the handler, to the people moving every aircraft at once. Adding one more voice to tell one aircraft to turn slightly left is how you lose the channel for everybody who needs it. There is a timing problem underneath that, and it is the one that actually decides the question. A radio call is serial. You key the microphone, you speak, someone hears the sentence end, someone answers. That is seconds, and an aircraft under power covers real distance in seconds. By the time the sentence finishes, the situation it described has moved on. So the deck runs on the one channel that never saturates: sight. Vision is parallel where voice is serial. A signal is received by the pilot, by the crew around that aircraft, by the director waiting to take it next, and by the supervisor on the island 6 stories up, all in the same instant with nothing to key. That single decision explains almost everything that looks strange about how these signals are made. They are not made with the hands, despite the name. They are made with the whole body, arms fully extended, elbows locked, motions deliberately large and slow. A flick of the wrist is invisible at 50 feet, and 50 feet is close range. The governing constraint is contrast. The signaler is usually being looked at against open sky, against floodlights, or against a wet deck throwing glare back into the cockpit. What the pilot receives is a silhouette, not a face, not fingers. So every signal is built to survive being reduced to an outline. If it does not read as a shape, it does not exist. That is also why the signaler stands exactly where he stands, forward of the aircraft and off to one side, inside the pilot's field of view, never behind it, and never where the nose blocks him. Position is part of the message. A perfectly correct signal given from the wrong place is not a weak signal. It is not a signal. And it is why the jerseys are so aggressively bright. The color tells you which job that figure holds, but the brightness tells your eye where to look first. On 4.5 acres of gray metal and shadow, a yellow shirt with both arms in the air is the most visible object on the ship. Now the vocabulary itself, starting with the signal, you will see more than all the others combined. Come forward. Arms bent at the elbow, hands open and up, drawing back toward the chest, over and over. It means keep moving toward me, and the speed of the hands sets the speed of the aircraft. The pace is the instruction. To turn, the director points with one arm toward the direction he wants the aircraft to go, while the other arm keeps beckoning. Both halves are required. The pointing arm is the heading, the moving arm is the permission. One without the other is an incomplete sentence, a direction with no authority behind it, or motion with no place to go. To slow down, the beckoning simply gets slower. Same gesture, less urgency, no new word required. To stop, both arms go straight up and cross above the head, and they stay crossed. Crossed arms are not a request to ease off. They mean this aircraft stops here, brakes on, and does not move again until this same person releases it. Chocks and chains carry their own signs, given low and close to the ground where the wheels are. Fists brought together and then pulled sharply apart means pull the chocks. Reversed, it means put them in. These decide whether the aircraft in front of you is a vehicle or furniture, and nothing on that deck is allowed to be ambiguous about which one it is. Subscribe. Engine start has a signal of its own because a pilot on a packed deck is not permitted to start on his own judgment. A finger circling above the head means the area is clear and you may turn that engine. Before it is given, somebody has walked the intake and the exhaust path and confirmed that nothing loose and nobody at all is standing in either. That gesture is a transfer of responsibility rather than a convenience. What it says is, I have inspected what you cannot see from that cockpit, and I am telling you it is safe to make this machine dangerous. Which is why it comes from one identified person holding that job, never from whoever is standing closest. Wings get their own vocabulary because a folded wing and a spread wing are effectively two different aircraft occupying two different footprints. The signal to spread is both arms sweeping outward from folded to fully extended, given only after the director has looked along the space beside that aircraft and found nothing a moving wingtip could reach. Spread too early and a wingtip finds a tail, a tow tractor, or a person. Spread too late and the aircraft arrives at the catapult in a configuration that cannot fly. Either way, the timing is not the pilot's call, not because anybody doubts him, but because from that seat he cannot see either wingtip. The man outside can see both. Hooking up to the catapult is the most tightly choreographed sequence anywhere on the ship. The aircraft is walked forward inches at a time by a director whose entire job is to place the nose gear on an exact mark. While that happens, people are working underneath the aircraft, on their knees, with the engines running. So there are signals about them too. A hold, meaning stop and expect nothing to move, because there are people below you. Then the release, when those people are clear and standing where the pilot can count them. He never sees the work done under his own aircraft. He knows it finished because a gesture told him so. The entire truss structure of the deck in miniature. The last signal before a launch is also the most formal one on the deck. With the aircraft at full power, tension applied and every checker satisfied, a salute passes from the deck to the cockpit and is returned. From a distance, it reads like ceremony. It is the final confirmation from both sides at once that this aircraft is ready to go. Which brings us to the rule that holds the whole system together, and it is not a gesture. Every signal has to be answered. A director does not issue an instruction and assume it arrived. He waits for the pilot to acknowledge. A nod, a return gesture, a light, and only then does the next instruction go out. Silence is never read as agreement out there. If the acknowledgement does not come back, the assumption is not that the pilot is busy or distracted. The assumption is that the message was never received. And the correct response is to stop. Not to repeat it louder, not to wave harder. Stopping costs almost nothing. This is the difference between a signal system and simply pointing at things. Signaling here is a loop, not a broadcast. Instruction, acknowledgement, action, confirmation, and only then the next instruction. Break that loop anywhere, and the aircraft is no longer moved by an agreement between two people. It is moved by one person's assumption. The loop also explains why handing an aircraft from one director to the next is an explicit gesture rather than a glance or an understanding. A single aircraft crosses several people's zones on its way to the catapult. Each of them owns it completely while it is inside their zone, and owns nothing the moment it leaves. The handoff is made by the first director pointing clearly at the second, who accepts it by taking up the beacon. Until that happens, the pilot is still watching the first man and nobody else. Two people signaling the same aircraft at the same time is the specific failure this small ritual exists to make impossible. Then there is the one signal in the vocabulary that does not belong to a job at all. Crossed arms above the head, stop, can be given by anyone standing on that deck to any aircraft at any moment. Not only directors, not only supervisors, anyone who sees something that should not be happening. That is a deliberate inversion of every other rule up there. Normally, staying inside your own lane is the entire discipline, and the colored jerseys exist so that being in the wrong lane is visible from 100 feet away. Stop is the one authority handed to every person on the deck, regardless of color, experience, or rank. And because it belongs to everyone, it is engineered to be unmistakable. It uses the whole body rather than the hands. It is held rather than flashed. And it resembles nothing else in the vocabulary, so it can be read from any angle, at any distance, by someone aboard one week, without wondering what else it might mean. At night, the vocabulary does not change at all, but the instrument does. Hands disappear against black water, so the signals move to lighted wands, one in each fist. The grammar is untouched, the same beckon, the same crossed arms, the same fingers circling overhead, drawn in light instead of silhouette. The wands solve the contrast problem in reverse. In daylight, a body is a dark shape against a bright sky. At night, that same body is invisible against black water and glare. A wand in each hand gives exactly 2 moving points of light per person, and a shape built from 2 points is still a shape. Night also slows the whole language down on purpose. Motions get bigger, holds get held longer, and directors work closer to the aircraft than in daylight. The vocabulary assumes the pilot is reading with less information, so it gives him fewer things to interpret, not more. All of which leads to the question people ask the first time they watch this happen. Why does a pilot obey a person he cannot hear, cannot identify by face, and very often outranks? The answer is not deference, and it is not tradition either. It is geometry. Sitting high up behind a long nose, that pilot cannot see his own wingtips. He cannot see his nose gear. He cannot see the people working underneath him, and he cannot see behind him at all. He has exactly one accurate picture of where his aircraft is, and that picture is the person standing in front of him. So the arrangement is not that the deck outranks the pilot. It is that on a flight deck, the pilot has voluntarily traded his eyes for someone else's, and the hand signals are how those borrowed eyes report. He follows them for the same reason he follows instruments inside a cloud. They are the better source. That is what those arm movements actually are. Not tradition, not showmanship for the cameras. An engineered communication system for a place that destroyed every easier option. Built out of silhouettes, held gestures, mandatory answers, and one word that absolutely anybody is allowed to say. And every one of those signals rests on something that has to be made true first, before any aircraft moves at all. The deck has to be clear. So the entire crew walks it, shoulder to shoulder, in one line from end to end, heads down, picking up by hand anything small enough for an engine to swallow. Every single day. That is the next one.